it is not only good for the individual, it is also critical for our economy. I told this story, I think, in this room just a while back, but I just want to repeat it because we were doing a session on science, technology, and math education. And one of the things that I'm very proud of this administration that nobody, except maybe Friedman and a couple others, have paid attention to is we are actually initiating more education reform, tougher education reform, than just about any administration over the last several years. And people like Randy and others are helping us in this process. But I told the story of my lunch with the President Lee of South Korea. And Gary, you were in that lunch. Remember I asked him, what's happening in terms of education policy in Korea? And he said, well, you know, my biggest problem is Korean parents are too demanding. And they are insisting, for example, that I import, and I've had to import, thousands of foreign English teachers because they all feel that first graders should be learning English already. Now you think about that mentality, which is pervasive throughout Asia. You saw the same thing in China. And it gives you a sense of what we're up against in terms of global competition. So as tough as this recession is, as tough as the job market may be, we need to double down on our education investment. We have to be more demanding of our schools, of ourselves as parents. Young people are going to have to be more demanding in terms of our ability to compete. And I don't want, the last thing I want, and this actually relates to the previous question, the last thing I want is us to essentially use up our seed corn here, to not make investments in education, to not make our investments in clean energy, to essentially say the only way we can handle this is to constrict our dreams and to go small because these other countries out there, they're making these investments in infrastructure, in education, in clean energy. And we can't lose the race just because we're going through a tough time right now. Now's the time actually to make sure that we're prioritizing properly and pushing even harder on that front. Okay. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, Fred Lampropoulos of Merit Medical Systems. One of the overriding thoughts in our forum was that there's uncertainty, that there's such an aggressive legislative agenda that business people don't really know what they ought to do. In fact, one CEO said that he thought he has to kind of wait and may have to restructure his business. This is a large multinational pharma company. And that uncertainty is really what's holding back the jobs. And I hear that a lot in the press. There's so much going on, no one really knows what to do. How are you going to give us that confidence and make sure that we're certain about both the near-term and long-term growth prospects?
You know, I actually think this is a legitimate concern. This has been a tough year with a lot of uncertainty. Now, at the beginning of this crisis, when we were in transition, we could have made a decision, and there are legitimate arguments for that decision, or there are legitimate arguments for the course that could have been taken, which is to say things are so bad. We've got 2 wars. We've got a crisis in the financial markets. We've just found out we lost 700,000 jobs per month in the first quarter, that we should not try any big initiatives legislatively. Just shouldn't do it until everything has stabilized and settled down. And I've strongly considered that argument. But I think the response is the point that was just made earlier, that if we keep on putting off tough decisions about health care, about energy, about education, we'll never get to the point where there's a lot of appetite for that. I mean, keep in mind, we just went through 10, 15 years where everything looked pretty good, except what happened was that growth was built on a house of cards. the fundamentals of the economy were weakening, and they were papered over by massive leverage, credit card debt, a housing market bubble. Our healthcare system we keep on putting off, but the fact of the matter is there is no way that businesses can sustain their current spending levels on healthcare. They can't do it, and families can't either. And this CEO of a pharmaceutical company, I think, would know that, because I'm sure that companies and healthcare providers are sending that message. So my belief was that we had to start tackling some of those fundamental problems if we were going to emerge stronger than we were before. Having said that, my strong hope is that we get healthcare done by the end of this year. That eliminates some uncertainty because people will have a sense of what's going to be happening in the healthcare field. That we get financial regulatory reform done, if not by the end of this year, then early next year, so that banks have certainty. And that, to the extent that the uncertainty is derived from these major legislative initiatives, I think will be solved in the next few months. I think that the best way for us to deal with long-term uncertainty is to tackle the things that we've been putting off and sweeping under the rug. There's no point in us pretending that these aren't problems and thinking that somehow we can go back to business as usual. Because I think if we take that approach, then we might be able to manage for the next 3 or 4, 5 years, but sooner or later we are going to get back into the same problems that we've already been in. And I think it's very important to start doing the hard business now. Okay. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Chandra Brown, and I'm the president of United Streetcar, which is a subsidiary of Oregon Ironworks, and we are hiring, and we are building the first modern streetcar in 58 years back in this country. So we're bringing jobs from Europe to here, and I just wanted to emphasize the importance of having the federal government as a partner in some of these infrastructures because we're a traditional manufacturing union house, and we want to be the next generation in clean energy, whether that's building streetcar vehicles for the 85 cities looking for it, whether it's building the first wave energy device that we're going to be building off the coast of Oregon. I think it's critical that our traditional manufacturing base, that those jobs stay here in the United States, and that we can continue to advance on those where it's going to be a benefit for all things, climate change, job creation, and economic development, especially for streetcars and the 85 cities that are looking at them.
I'm looking forward to writing on one of them.